Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to you? Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe.
When I was 9-ish, I had a bedroom that was decorated insanely by the landlord. Bright pink flowered wallpaper, and one wall had like 50 small, square-shaped mirrors on it that made one big mirror. My parents had put my bed against the wall, making the mirror a sort of headboard. One night I woke up with the insane feeling that I needed to move. It was like someone quite literally spoke to me, "You need to move." So I did. I grabbed my pillow and moved to the end of the bed, legs curled up close to my body. Not 2 minutes later, half the little mirrors fell onto the bed, right where my head would have been. Broken glass everywhere. That was the first time I've ever experienced the gut feeling, and one of my most vivid memories as a child. Or it was a ghost. If so, thanks, ghost. My face isn't horribly scarred. When I and my brother were kids and supposed to be in bed at night, but instead we were playing on the floor of our bedroom. I was around 5 at the time, and I remember vividly looking up at the door and seeing a dark, shadowy face peering around the corner, open the door, looking at us with a hand on the doorframe. As soon as it saw me looking at it, it pulled back and out of sight. I assumed it was one of my parents checking on us, making noise, so I told my brother, and we jumped back into bed, expecting a telling off. When nothing happened after a few minutes, I was a bit confused and went downstairs to ask my parents, as something felt off. They said they hadn't been upstairs all night. Cue me bursting into tears, and my father checking all the bedrooms with a hammer. I saw it so vividly and knew it wasn't a trick of the light or anything like that. I was 17 years old at the time, driving a route I had frequently driven. For some reason, I had a strong gut feeling to get out of the lane I needed to be in and go down to the next light, missing the original exit and adding 5 minutes to my commute to the grocery store. Decided to trust the gut feeling and got in the left lane. I continued driving and had to go a back street to get to the parking lot that would have been a straight shot the other way. Leaving the store about 20 minutes later, I look over at the exact spot that I was previously in when I felt I needed to move. A tractor trailer had collided with another tractor trailer, accordioning a vehicle in the middle. The car in the middle was the vehicle that was driving directly behind me when I decided to take the longer way. I remember so vividly because I think we were both listening to music and bobbing to the beat. Her car was squished to the point you couldn't see the front from the back, like a literal pancake. I still think about that poor woman often because that accident should have been me.
I'd probably say some random bouts of deja vu. One involved me seeing a fork that my dad was trying to help me put together the G.I. Joe, well, technically Cobra, the Blackbird jet. And I saw this in my mind, like the fork he was using, like flung at me, and it happened. So that was wild. I think it was 11 or 12. And other than that, a lot of stuff actually, but we'll get to that another day. Anyway, have a great night, guys.
My mom and I were heading back from a doctor's visit she had in the next city to our west. On the way back, the highway was really backed up, so we decided to just take the back roads. We take the next exit and head south until we come across a road we know that runs east to west and back to our town. We turn east, which by all logic should return us to our town. 50 to 20 minutes later, we end up back like 2 streets over from where her doctor's office was. We were really confused how that happened, seeing as we should have only been going east. We got back on the highway that took the same exit, made the same turn onto the same road, and ended up exactly where we were supposed to the first time. I have no fucking clue what happened, or how, or what I did different, if anything. Have tried recreating a couple of times since, but Every time it's taken me east the way it's supposed to be. Found an old abandoned steam locomotive deep in the forest on some family property. The whole property was mapped out, every tree and bush, etc. No one had ever heard of a train being there. Just an old locomotive in a single locomotive wooden shed with no record of tracks ever being built there. There was about 20 feet of track coming out of the shed. I explored it, confused about where it came from and which railroad it belonged to. It was very quiet. The locomotive was all rusty and worn. Then the whistle blew somehow. I've been told it can be from buildup of steam pressure, but steam from what? Its boiler was cold to the touch. Couldn't sleep that night. Went back the next day and it was just gone. Nothing. No locomotive, no shed, no tracks, just a few railroad spikes, which I still have today. Came and went without a trace. A few months ago, I was alone in the house until my then 5-month-old. She was napping on my lap and it was early evening, so it was already dark and all the lights were off, so the room was dark except for the light from the TV. I was watching Harry Potter, which I've watched so much I know off by heart. I paused it for a minute so the house was silent, when all of a sudden I could hear the sound of a woman sobbing so clearly it was like someone was holding a recording near my ear. It wasn't coming from my phone. The TV was paused and the scene didn't feature anyone crying. There were no devices on in the house that could have been connected to someone's Bluetooth outside of the house. The crying lasted about 5 seconds. It was just so bizarre and so clear, and I can't figure out an explanation for it. My second apartment was a trailer out on a gorgeous farm. The trailer was in rough shape, but I loved the land we lived on. I was home alone one day, reading in bed, and heard the sound of like a stick dragging against the siding outside my bedroom window. I was friendly with all the neighbors, so I assumed one of my friends came by to pester me. I peeked out the window where I first heard the sound and didn't see anyone. The dragging sound started moving around the front of the house. I followed it out of the bedroom and down the hall, peeking out all of the windows as I went. The dragging sound carried around the outside of the kitchen and sounded like it came up the porch and stopped at my front door. I was freaking out at this point, but bravely peeked out the door, and there was no one there. No stick left on my porch, and I realized I didn't hear any footsteps coming up the porch either. I'd asked my friends on the farm if they'd come by, and no one had. My neighbors said they didn't see anyone outside of my house. Over a decade later, if this was a joke somehow, no one's owned up to it. Friends suggested at the time that maybe an animal was skittering around underneath the trailer, but carrying a stick? Around the perimeter of my house and up the stairs, I swear it ended at my door, not under the porch. I've never understood what that could have been, and I still get the heebie-jeebies when I think about it. When I was younger, I had this angel light that was on the shelves above my bed. I believe my neighbor gave it to me. One morning, I woke up with the cord unplugged, wrapped around my neck 2 times, and holding the angel in my arm like I was cuddling it. To say I was freaked would be an understatement. I put it in my closet, where it stayed for months. My mom found the light and put it back on the shelf months later, and I didn't think anything of it until I woke up one morning in the exact same way. I will admit that I've been known to walk in my sleep, but I can't imagine purposely wrapping a cord around my neck, but maybe, so I threw it in a box, hoping to not see it again. We moved when I was 14, and I put it on my desk because my mom handed it to me. One morning I woke up with it in my dresser next to my bed. I put it in a box and put it in the attic. Fast forward to 35-year-old me. My mom hands me a box and I open it, and the angel light is staring at me. I shut the box and added it to my donations. It's officially out of my house, but I still have no idea what was happening. Was I doing that in my sleep? Was my brother messing with me? Were my parents meeting with me? Or the obvious, was the angel light haunted? This happened to me when I was 17. I grew up in the very rural Adirondack Mountains. My adopted brother and I were hunting coyotes that had been stalking our dogs for the past week. I came up with the idea to hide on a roof. Coyotes have great smell and spook easy. Being so high up meant the wind picking up on our scent would, in theory, blow over the top of them, as well as give us a better shot to take. We had been on the roof for maybe 2 hours at this point, and it was around 1 a.m. I think when we heard the loudest stomping through the woods I've ever heard in my life. It sounded like trees were being uprooted. It was crazy. That goes on for like 2 minutes all the way up the mountain next to my house. We have no idea what we just heard, but figured it was, I don't know, maybe a spooked deer or something. The next morning we decided to go out and see if we could find the path. Sure enough, about 40 feet into the woods, we find what I can only describe as a tunnel that was carved through the forest. Trees knocked over, branches broken 20 feet up in the air. It looked like someone just scooped out part of the forest. To this day, I have no idea what could have done that. My only guess is maybe a moose, but I've never seen one or heard of people seeing one where I live. And even by dino moose standards, I think those branches were too high up. Think about that night every now and again and still get the creeps. When I was around 12 to 13, my mom and I just got home from work or school. It was winter, so I was already dark. She went outside with the dog, so I went up to my room to change. As I walked by my parents' bedroom, I felt a very weird, scary presence coming from their pitch-black bedroom. Then I heard a god-awful evil laugh come from their room. Like it truly sounded like a high-pitched demon laughing. I was absolutely petrified, and there was nothing to make that laugh. No one else was home, and TVs weren't on yet. I remember I started singing some TV show theme song really loud to distract myself, and ran down the hall to my mom. She was walking in the door with the dog and asked me why I was singing so loud. She could hear me from outside. I told her about the frightening laugh, but she kind of dismissed it. Years later, my parents had the house paranormally investigated by a college group, and stuff showed up in the pictures they took. Their meters also went off. Thank God my parents don't live there anymore. When I was a teenager, I decided to sneak out to be with a girl I liked. This was a whole undertaking, due in part to it being 20 kilometers, 12.5 miles or so, walk out into some really densely wooded forest. I was 16, but didn't have my license or a car yet, so I left my parents' house early with the excuse that I'd be hanging out with friends. They were always too high to care about where I was, so that part was easy enough. Really, the hardest part was the walk and sneaking into her window without her parents catching me. But that was something I was used to doing. On this walk, I'd cross a highway, walk past a winding creek, meet a fork in the road, climb up a huge hill, find myself in a deep forest, hit a midway point at an abandoned farm with the only street light in the whole forest, and eventually I'd come to a clearing where the house was the first place on the right. It was mostly a straight shot, albeit a long one, so I got there fine. I don't feel like recounting my debauchery as a teenager, so I'll leave what we got up to all to your imagination. It was 3 a.m., and she was tired and needed rest. I couldn't sleep over for obvious reasons, so I headed out. I was a quarter of the way through the dark expanse of the forest when I heard something that sounded like a scream. I was on edge, but going forward, but it just kept getting closer. It went from far away and off to my left to directly behind me with a piece. Eventually, it was right next to me, screaming all the while. I was told as a kid to keep your face forward and keep a steady pace when you think something is following you in the forest. To be honest, I was horrified and didn't think in those moments that I could even fathom turning to look at this thing. It just kept screaming that blood-curdling scream directly into my ear. I figured it must have been close to my height or so, by how I could feel it right next to me. It started to get farther away until I could only hear it behind me, then back off to my far left. Soon it was silent again. I kept my pace steady until I got home at the halfway point, where I decided to book it the rest of the way home after catching my breath a little. I was home at around 6:30 in that morning and went straight to bed. A lot of people have told me it was a fox or some type of bird over the years, but I don't think either would have been able to scream in my ear for a few miles. My only real explanation was that it was possibly a hallucination, but I suppose I'll never know. This happened a few years ago to make me while I worked from my college's phone center. I have a few weird stories from this call center that always freak me out. This is an old school that opened in the late 1800s. My college has always had ghost stories, especially in the theater, since it's one of the oldest buildings on campus. There was one in particular about this kid who was incredibly involved in the theater and ended up taking his own life in the theater itself. One night, after the bars closed and a good few drinks, my buddies and I went into the theater after hours wanting to just talk and walk around. We went to a very small school with very relaxed rules, so nothing was ever locked. While we were all in there, we just got this very intense feeling of just dread and loneliness, like we weren't supposed to be there, and promptly left as soon as possible from the bad vibes. We kept hearing footsteps and floorboards creaking, all that nonsense, until the next day, late at work, I'm doing my calls to alumni and people associated with the school. It was an automated system that would just give us names and phone numbers to call. I'm doing my job, calling all kinds of people until I get the name that just feels intensely familiar to me for some reason. I give the number a ring, and I'm talking with this clearly elderly woman who picks up the phone. She's very kind. I'm giving her parts of my script, asking about her thoughts on the school until she hits me with, "Is my son still playing around the theater?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Turns out the woman I called was the mother to the kid who passed away. She ends up giving me her story and everything that has happened, and I'm like, "No way." And I tell her about everything that happened the previous night. She tells me how she was making her peace with it and just happy to hear that he's still just as mischievous as she remembers him. It was honestly such a sweet interaction, despite how tragic the events were. It makes me wonder if just having the connection with a spirit was just complete chance, but it's something I will always think about. Stop by an antique store in my neighborhood on my way home to meet a friend. Say hi to the owner couple as usual. They were assisting some customers. I was just killing time and I saw an old Mickey Mouse pin on the shelf behind the glass and figured I'd wait till the owners were done assisting to ask them about the pin. Then an old lady behind the counter asked if I needed assistance. I hadn't seen her before at the store or noticed her when I came in, but I asked about the pin. She gave me some info, pointed at something else, but said that she couldn't open my cabinets and that I'd have to help her from the new owners. I just said, "Sure, thanks, I'll wait," or something like that, and browsed while I waited. The lady, I remember, was kind, but a bit too old to be working there. After a few minutes, the owners were still busy, and I had to leave. And as I was heading out, one of the owners asked if I had a question about something and said that I had looked deep in thought, mumbling to myself by the counter. I said I'd asked the lady about a Mickey Mouse pin and that I'd be back the next day to check it out. The owner said, "Which lady?" and looked at the desk, and there was no one there, and no one in the store apart from myself, the owners, and the customers. There was a back room of the store, but it was right next to the entrance where I'm now standing, so the old lady would have had to pass me on her way out. which in this tiny shelf-crowded store wasn't possible. I felt a bit weird, but mostly stupid, and said, yeah, and goodbye, and left. And when I walked past the shadow, I swear I saw the Order of the Lady standing behind the counter. Sometimes later, I visited the store, checked out the pin, but I felt weird about it, and I knew that if I'd buy the pin, I'd probably always think about this day. Confusing or serious, I swear I saw the old lady standing behind me at the counter. Sometime later, I visited the store, checked out the pin, but felt weird about it, and I knew that I'd buy that pin. I'd probably always think about this day, who seriously don't believe existed at all, or something. I don't know.